Let us pray. O God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, our strength and our salvation. Amen. So, this morning, put on your thinking caps a little bit. Something rigorous for us to chew up as we think about the start of Lent coming up soon. Okay, ready? Currently, we all think of time as something that passes. It's as if time was made out of water. Time moves in a straight line like a river. It empties out of yesterday. It rushes past us here in the present moment right now. And then it falls forward into a murky waterfall future beyond our line of sight. Right? This idea, time as a river, so ingrained inside us, so fundamental to our notion of self and culture and progress, it's almost impossible to think about anything other than this notion of time. But apparently we can think outside of this notion. And if you look back in history of other cultures, it is abundantly clear that humans didn't always think of time the way they do now. In fact, even today, in modern physics, most of our scientists are telling us that this notion of time as a river is in fact a psychological projection that we human beings project onto the actual situation. Bet you thought you were going to get a fluff piece this morning at church, right? Not at all. But now, this is mainly just interesting to me, and something worth engaging with as far as I'm concerned. But, as we approach the annual repetitive practice of Lent every spring, we're reminded in this practice of a time where we used to think about time in a very, very different way. The way we currently think of time, this is the time as a river idea, many historians and sociologists like Mircea Eliade have for years and years said that this notion of time is very much a Judeo-Christian creation. It comes out of the Hebrew scriptures. A lot of people have argued this, I think, successfully. That in the scriptures, time is that thing where the past is something where we used to be with the sacred. Once upon a time, we used to be with God. The present is a period of exile, of doubt and fear. And the future is a revelation that could be good, could be bad, but it's always a little murky. In short, from the Bible, many have argued, philosophers of history and science, from the Bible comes our modern sense of time as we know it. The Hebrew myths evolved directly into the desacralized modern myth that we call history, where our distance from anything sacred or meaningful grows greater and greater every day. Okay, just want to put that in your brain right up front. Now, the spiritual practice of Lent, which we start this week, this refers back to a different model of time, where time was not a river, where time was more like a whirlpool, or a circle, a cosmic wheel that went around and around. This goes way back before Christians appropriated the annual celebration that led up to the spring equinox. Lent had this quality. All the extended festivals celebrated how every year the planet, and we can all still feel it on those first sunny days of any season, how every year some part of all of us dies in winter. And every spring, some part of us is born again. That's what Lent came from originally, this idea of a long festival that led up to the equinox time. But in our Christian tradition, since we took it, sort of have it now for our own, Lent is a kind of sacred time. It says that on a lot of the little calendars they send to us ministers. We're now entering sacred time. Here we are reminded that the presence of God is not something that humans only experienced a long time ago, way back in the past of our species. And nor is the sacred or the actual presence of God something that we've got to work for way off in the future. We've got to earn over time. In Lent, instead, in sacred time, we evoke the reality that God is real, and God and the Spirit is something that is immediately at hand right in our lives. And because this is something far bigger than our conventional sense of ourselves can possibly take in, we have 40 days to try to unpack it and experience this presence through sacred ritual. Brief History of Lent by Michael Ellick, right there. You got it. At first, in Lent, we practice it through prayer and through confession. But then later, as we approach Holy Week, through a kind of mystical participation with the Passion story. You've all been there. If you've been to Christian church, you know what I'm talking about. But in this way of thinking about time, this original, older way of thinking about time, we're not now entering into Lent of the year 2017 for the very first time. Instead, we are returning back to the very same Lent that always was and always will be. It's like that movie Groundhog Day. Through this annual cycle of time, we get a chance to see the same situation in a new way. We get to see our life circumstances more fully, learn from our successes and failures, and then we get to start fresh. Every time. Now, okay, that piece now in your brain a little bit, because this week we are talking about time and perspective and taking stock of oneself. I want to share with you this crazy story. And fair warning, it might be the most unbelievable and also the most interesting thing you're going to hear next, all week, I would argue. But this insane thing happened to me 10 years ago. I want to share it with you. And it probably isn't what it seems like, but it was so vivid that it changed my life up until the present day. Once upon a time, I was living in Queens, New York, and it was spring, and it was late afternoon, and I was reading this book. I can't remember what the book was, in bed, and this memory comes back to me. You know, it just comes to my head, like sometimes that happens, of when I was in high school, and it was specifically this moment. I'd been in a bad car wreck when I was young. I went through a windshield, and I had like a week of convalescence, but I had this memory of lying in my bed post-accident. With all this, it was like the first day I was kind of up and around and taking off stuff, and I had this sense, the memory was so clear and vivid, that I had this sense, I don't know where it came from, that I could just step into that memory. And if I did, I might be back in 1989, when I was 15. And that's what happened. My body had a jolt. And I opened my eyes, and I was back in my high school bedroom. Now I know what you're thinking, and of course you're probably right. What probably happened was just that I fell asleep. I probably just fell asleep and had a dream. It's probably what it was. I totally accept that. But my subjective experience was not that that's what happened. My subjective experience was that I faded right into 1989, and I was back upstairs in my old bedroom at my parents' house in Washington State, Fairmont Island. And it was amazing. In my experience, I was right there, and my old bedroom. And I remembered it, but I couldn't remember all the little mixtapes and trinkets. But yes, I forgot about, I made this thing, and little clothes I used to wear. It was all there. It was all there. It was real. And so I did what anyone would do. I got up, and I looked around, and I went downstairs, and it was a Saturday, and there was my family, 18 years younger, my mom and my dad, watching television over breakfast, and my little brother, who's only 8 years old, and whatever I looked like at the time, it must have been weird, because my mom, immediately gets up, Michael, what's wrong with you? You know, she just knows, moms know stuff. And I don't know what I said, and I remember thinking it was just like Groundhog Day, right? It had already come out. And not only had I traveled back in time, but I got thinking, now I can relive my life with all the knowledge and experience of someone who was 33 at the time. That this will be it, right? And I know the future. If only I paid attention to sports, I could make money betting on games, but I don't, really. Can't bet on, anyway, it doesn't matter. But I laughed out loud, and I was like, from now on, things are going to be a lot different. And this freaked my mom out even more. And so I thought, note to self, don't pretend you're 15. This went on for days, weeks, with time ticking forward at a regular rate back in 1989. And eventually the weekend passes. I go back to high school. I go to Bainbridge Island High School. And I encourage all of you to think about, what would it be like if your present day self got lifted up off the surface of time and put back in the 10th grade? Well, you would have all these advantages, right? And I'm not just talking about being smarter or whatever, knowing more about geometry or something like this. It was being unstuck in time. I didn't have any anxiety about anything. I was not attached to any of the things that were going on, right? What do I care if someone doesn't like me too much? What do I care if someone's giving me flack? Like, this is just some stupid kid, right? You're free. Free. Totally free. Unstuck in time. But it was also really strange, because you realize that your life is kind of hemmed in by these forces. And even though I had all these obvious advantages, in many ways, going back in time, which I had the experience of, it really cast an unflattering light on my then 33-year-old self as time went forward. In some ways, I could see that I had grown up and I'd matured over the years, but contrary to my own PR about myself, I also saw the ways in which I was stuck, in which some of those adolescent acts you put on and defense mechanisms that you create, how they'd gotten stuck in me. And they shaped me, they'd hardened certain aspects of who I was. I wasn't entirely pleased with what I saw. Now, I'll get back to 1989 in just a second. But I want to draw the streams together here for a moment. Starting this Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, our tradition says we also enter into a kind of sacred time. And maybe you think that's just some kind of metaphor. I personally do not. If you'd like, you too could step into this sacred time as a kind of spiritual practice. You can wade into these waters should you be so daring. At the very least, you may not travel back in time, but Lent is supposed to be a break from all our habitual habits, patterns, and customs that define regular time. Again, I think on some subconscious level, for all of us, whether you think you're Christian or not, we've all been influenced by that Judeo-Christian thing for so long that on some subconscious level, I think our regular time has already been defined by the Bible and its Bible's sense of exile. Exile originally from Eden, exile from the Promised Land, later exile from the kingdom of God. But as that Christian culture becomes a modern culture, that feeling of exile carries over into our modern renaming process, where we just say, I feel lost. I feel disillusioned. I have a feeling of being unworthy or separated from anything that has meaning or fulfillment. I'm an atheist, by the way. You might say this, I'm not, but someone might say this. But they still have that sense of exile, regular time. Now, Lent attempts to interrupt this. The practice of Lent usually starts with a kind of personal inventory, which is why we're talking about it a few days in advance. In preparation for Lent every year, Christians are encouraged, you don't have to be Christian to do this, to take a long view look at the whole of your life. Rediscover where you've come from. Remember where it is you're going. and to then make adjustments. It's kind of house cleaning time, a little bit of a purging time. Many people choose to give up something for Lent. You always hear this, I'm giving up sugar or whatever else. You can do that if you choose. But this isn't supposed to be a ritualized penance. Instead, you might ask yourself, what are the various acts and defense mechanisms that I still have running? And do they really serve me? You might ask, what are the little behaviors and weird catches that go with those acts and those defense mechanisms? And do those little behaviors still serve me? And what would it look like if I gave them up for 40 days? Most likely, all of you right here, right now, already have some sense of something you'd like to give up in your brain. That's fine. What would it be like if you actually did it and had the support of a community to help you do it? Ash Wednesday is this coming Wednesday. We're going to have a service downstairs in the Kiva. It's when our normal time for practicing the presence meditation would happen. It's going to be at 6 o'clock downstairs. You could join us. On Ash Wednesday, we let some of our old selves die so that we can step into sacred time. Step away from those things that keep us rooted in that sense of exile. The 40 days of Lent are an echo of Jesus spending 40 days in the wilderness, 40 days to let one's old life pass so that something new can happen, something fresh. So back to 1989. So you want to know, right? It's interesting. So weeks pass. I'm still there in the 10th grade, and eventually I told one of my good friends about it, somebody who lived with me in New York in the future. I told him all about it, but I covered it because I was self-conscious. I said it was a dream. I had this dream. I knew it was a dream. Anyway, I told him, and I said, could you remember this? Because maybe in the future, I don't know, I thought something. But I get scared as the time passes. I think about my cats. I got to feed the cats. Like, is time passing there too? You know what I mean? And I think, can I ever get back there? Is it possible? So one day, I go back upstairs to my bedroom, and I lie in bed, and I picture myself back in Queens. And I do the same thing. I am able to step back into a life in New York City in 2007. And that was it. I was back. And I know the only rational explanation is that this is a dream. I dreamt this. And maybe it is true, because I have no evidence at all to prove otherwise. I went to my friend who I told this whole story to, and I was like, do you remember when we were 15 after the accident? Blah, 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 blah. And it's inconclusive. He basically said, Michael, you used to say a lot of crazy stuff. I really don't know. Who knows? The only thing that actually comes a little bit close, sort of, to evidence of possibility happened, this is now off the sermon, but I'm just going to share it with you, happened years later when I first introduced my now wife, then girlfriend, Alana, to my parents. We flew to Seattle. And I was in the next room. My mom was talking to Alana, and she's telling her, I can hear it, I'm eavesdropping, she's telling Alana the story about when I was 15, right after the accident. And because my mom, and I'm listening, because my mom has this script that after the accident, Michael was a real jerk for a while. That was like her story. It might be true. But this is, she's telling this girlfriend, I'm trying to impress. So I'm listening to it, and sure enough, Mom's saying that, yeah, Michael's a real jerk after the accident, But she adds this one detail. She says, this is my mom speaking, she says, I'll never forget it. Michael comes downstairs, it was Saturday morning, he takes off his bandages, and he said, from now on, things are going to be a lot different. I can't prove anything, but I know it. Who knows whether it's real? But the experience is so real to me to this day. It's something I think a lot about. Time does not feel like a river. Time feels like an ocean, raging in a storm, moving in all directions, in all arenas, making all things possible, because in God, all things can be possible. I really believe that. And it might sound a little out there, but as we enter into this spring season of sacred time, I would speak less to your linear time-creating psychology of your brains, and I would speak more to the timeless intuition of all our hearts that exists outside that river. Our exile can end. Our sense of exile can be transcended. We are not stranded in some desert anymore. We are free inside the garden. And let us consider that if we are not finding in our lives what is most sacred and meaningful right now in the current context of our lives today, we will never find it anywhere. You might work for years and years. You might work for progress. You might pay your dues or do all the things you think you're supposed to do in order to earn happiness and get out of exile or whatever it is that's happening on some subconscious level. But if you do this, all you will be doing is building out of your sense of exile, and exile is all that you will get, regardless of how you name your own religiosity. Instead, let us consider that there is a process we can all go through. Let us consider the possibility that all things might be possible to be made new again. That the happiness, the fulfillment that we are always looking for somewhere off in a murky future beyond our sight might not be as far off as we are led to think. It takes a revolution of the mind and the heart and your life. But it can happen. It can happen, I think, in 40 days or less. The presence of God is now. It's always been now. It's happening now. It's immediately at hand.